Sonnet 18 by William Shakespeare. Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? Thou art more lovely and more temperate. Rock wind to shake the darling buds of May, and summer's lease has all too short a date.
Hello world and welcome to Poetry Today. I am your host, Resti. I believe some of you are a fan of Shakespeare, and one could recognize the poetry recited in the opening as the first quatrain of one of his famous sonnets, Sonnet 18. Today, the topic of our discussion is Shakespeare's Sonnet 18 is famous, but is it still worth discussing? Now, of course, I won't be alone. I will be accompanied by our lovely guest who will give us better understanding for this topic. We will have a talk with Rinaldi, who is often starred in films adaptation of famous literary works, as well as ANGGA, a poet who is recently referred to as the most influential person of the century by Kala. And finally, PANJI and ALZAR, which will provide more depth of perspective on Shakespeare's ideas. Works. Now, dear guest, Rinaldi, after seeing you in several films like Di Bawah Naungan Kopiah, I wonder if you perhaps growing interest in literature works apart from the books adapted to the movies you starred in.
Well, based on my experience, of course, I am interested in literature works.
Of course you are. The way you act is very soulful, like someone who has read a lot of classical literature. It's fascinating. I think you already know about this sonnet. Can you give us some of your opinion?
So my opinion about this sonnet is that it's still worth to discuss as a romantic meaning. I always melt every time I read that poem. Other than that, it addresses a very human fear that one day we will die and will most likely be forgotten.
I see. Now, our guest, Panji, I have seen your reviews on Shakespeare's sonnets on your blog. I must say I was astonished by your review. It's brilliant and very intriguing. That is why we, Poetry Today, invite you to share your thoughts regarding Sonnet 18. Can you give us some comments on this sonnet? What makes you so interested in reviewing it?
It addressed a very human fear. The speaker of the poem insists that the beauty of his beloved will never truly die because he has immortalized her in text. There is something particular about this sonnet that make it so memorable. It was designed to be a memorable being, and it was related to the story of many people. That's why I'm so interested in reviewing it.
Oh, wow. Now I'm sure the audience was wondering about your reviews too. I'm curious about your interpretation of the sonnet, Panji. Does it remind you of certain events in your life?
I say that in Sonnet 18, beauty is only temporary, but poetry can make it last forever. The poet started the praise without ostentation, but he slowly built the image into that of a perfect being.
I see. And how about you, Rinaldi?
So, in my opinion, Sonnet 18 to praise his beloved beauty and describe all the ways in which their beauty is preferable to a summer day. It tells about someone who adores his lover. For him, the beauty of his lover will be eternal and will never change even through the time pass.
No, that's amazing. Okay, so moving on to Anga, our dear guest. As a poet whose work has been internationally acclaimed, what is your impression of this legendary sonnet?
Okay, thank you for your question, Mrs. Resti. So, this Sonnet 18 by William Shakespeare, is one of Shakespeare's work done in the late 16th century. And my impression reading and listening to this sonnet is that I like very much this sonnet. And even though this is one of old poem, it is still worth reading for me.
No, from you have said, I get the impression that this sonnet is quite old and may no longer suit modern lifestyle. Do you agree with me?
Well, for that, I don't think so because this sonnet is very amazing. my opinion, it's very amazing, and its typical vocabulary used determine that this is a great poem. It's a great poem, and it may outlive an old poem, Shakespeare's poem in our era, in the 21st century.
I see. And how about you, AHZA? I see you have a lot to say regarding the sonnet. Do you agree with me?
I don't think I agree with you, Resti. It is a piece of legendary poem we are talking about. Of course, it's still worth to be discussed. The message that we can interpret from this poem is as deep as the sea. If we can understand the meaning behind this poem, we will find out about its beauty. This poem uses words such as thou and thee, which is an archaic language that people nowadays have a hard time understanding. Nevertheless, this poem is intriguing. To say the least, the writer has a broad imagination to make a poem just to praise his lover. The rhymes are also beautifully done, and the metaphor used to compare her beauty with eternal summer is also lovely. I think that's all for me.
Oh, that's interesting. Compared to contemporary literary works of poetry, what makes you give such a statement on Sonnet 18?
Well, yes, contemporary literary work may be more suitable in this current era, but we can't forget the older one. A poem like this can ascend through time. People in a different era, when reading this poem, will make the same conclusion about the poem. It means that even in a different era, the meaning behind a poem will almost be the same. So we cannot just cast aside all poems. Rather, we need to learn from them to make a better poem ourselves.
I see. And ANGGA, how about you?
Well, in my perspective, Sonnet 18 is very different from other poetries, and compared to contemporary poetries, this Sonnet 18 is very, very typical. Well, and it is better than contemporary literary works of poetry because from the title, we can see that it is about comparison. Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? And you know that it's also used romantic words.
Okay. Now, from our discussion, I found a lot of charm in the sonnet. Is it because of the magic of Shakespeare or the beauty of the poem itself? Rinaldi and Panji, could you give us some of your opinions?
So, in my opinion, this charm and feeling is from the beauty of the poem itself because Sonnet 18 using metaphor compares his lover to a summer day. The sonnet also contains a few symbols, such as summer, which represent youth and beauty, as well as nature and the other seasons, which represents life and death. Sonnet Shakespeare features the following elements. There are 14 lines long, and the 14 lines are divided into 4 groups, and there are typically 10 syllables per line, which are praised in iambic pentameter.
From me, I will discuss in terms of the theme of the poem. Throughout the whole poem, the speaker talks about the beauty of his beloved. So I think the theme is admires the beauty of his beloved in different ways throughout 3 quatrains. He starts by asking his beloved whether he should compare him with a summer day or not. The comparison starts from the very next line, where the speaker mentioned the limitation of summer in comparison to his beloved. On the other hand, his beloved is temperate and does not go to extreme. The speaker also claimed that his beloved is lovelier than a summer day.
Wow, that is truly fascinating. I guess that's why they say classics never die. There is a lot of beauty restored in them, timeless and meaningful. Well, it's time to wrap up the show. Thank you to our lovely guests for joining us today. Despite the changing times, classics remain iconic and timeless. Join us tomorrow on Poetry Today. I am your host, Resti. Good day, everyone.